given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, today's going to be a very interesting dialogue. So this has been requested. A lot of people, they don't understand the process of how somebody can wind up having sex with an inmate. So we've done a few videos on it, but we're still getting some emails. So me and Connie we're going to cultivate a really deep discussion, but I want you guys to know that this discussion is centered on a shift in perspective. What I mean by that is that you have staff that comes in with good intent and then eventually falls victim to whatever the act's going to be. Ultimately, let's just say sex with an inmate, but we'll see where the dialogue goes. Now, granted, there are going to be some staff that's their mindset and that's what they do. But guys, we wouldn't have a show. Be like, oh, hey, guy came in wanting to have sex. He had sex. Hey, guys, see you next week. You know, I want to show the shift. I want to show how someone with good intent can come in and be transformed. I'm not even going to say cultivate, because I want somebody with a foundation that has good intent, but maybe it's a weak foundation, and how the inmates can transform it and shift it. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, that officer winds up getting caught up in a physical act. And the reason why we're having this dialogue is to kind of show you how evolved this game is, and also to put, some onus on the people that play it. Because at the end, there's going to be a lot of people that's like, oh, Gange, you got to be a fool when it happens. And maybe, but there's a process. And I think this dialogue that me and Connie are going to have today are really going to dive in, give some perspectives, and we're going to, put ourselves in the shoes of someone that is on their way to be compromised. And I think it's going to be very interesting. And hopefully along the way, if you guys find value in this, comment, because, we want to kind of have those interactions. But this is going to be a very good dialogue, a little advanced. But again, we got Connie, author, podcast, business owner. What's going on, Connie?
Hello, everyone. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I am also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall. And the new season will be starting soon. And Anthony Gangi will be on my podcast. So let's get that out the way right now. And I am the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. And certainly this topic tonight, I don't know where it's going to take us, just because there's a lot to explore, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Again, guys, I also have a book on the market, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. The links will be in the description if you guys get a chance. Check out the books. Again, The Cage Was a Cocoon, great book, very inspirational. This book kind of models off the process of manipulation, so it's kind of meant to inform. Already thinking of a second book, by the way, just with different scenarios, if you will. We had a good discussion today about an inmate barber. Would you allow an inmate to cut your hair? And it just became controversial because some people have been doing it for a while. And then some people are like, nope. And because again, it could be that obligation, that feeling of trust. And it's just a very interesting dialogue. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Chair Talks to you, brave men and women that work in correction. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the process of turning a good staff member bad. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, and we're back. So, Connie, obviously, before we break into the dialogue, you understand why I wanted to first tell people that, yes, we do have those officers or staff members that are rogue, and this is their mentality. But we do have some staff that it was never their intent, but it happens. So why is it important that we actually have a show that talks about that process? Because do you think that good staff can be turned?
So I do think good staff can be turned. I always just question the motive of how the good staff gets turned, only because those are the staff who are coming in trying to just get their job done, right? Like those are the staff that are truly dedicated. And I feel like when that does happen, there was something that they may have seen in that inmate that made that inmate appear to be a good person, right? And like, I don't know, made them willing to jeopardize their careers, or maybe they didn't realize that their career would be in jeopardy, or that the inmate would ever jeopardize them or put them in a compromising position. It's just always like a lot of that goes on. I think going through many investigations, like you hear different reasons why, right? Like, oh, well, I was just trying to help, or I didn't like, it was harmless, or, I knew the inmate was going to be getting out and like, I didn't think anything about it. It's just like all these things that, people who are really just doing their jobs to the best of their ability, and they end up connecting and bonding to some extent with some of these inmates who get them to start doing things that are really out of their character.
Right. And I definitely think, guys, it starts with the foundation of someone going in. If you have a good, strong internal foundation, morals, integrity, just a good understanding of what's expected of you, but the reason why you do the job is really because you're the professional. You have morals, you have high integrity. You believe in what you do. You're professional. That foundation could be a strong foundation, very hard for the inmates to shift it. Not saying it can't happen, but it could be too time consuming. Now, if I go in with a weaker foundation where the governing of what I do is based on consequences or the chances of being caught, that's a weaker foundation. So less likely or less amount of time for an inmate to maybe shift that perspective. So it's very key, and we recognize this in other videos, that you recognize why you do what you do, but also recognize why you don't do what you do, and make sure that the reasoning, the foundation is internal. It's you, not for any other reasons. Like, yes, consequences, policies, and procedures. That's not strong enough. Because as me and Connie have our dialogue, we're going to show you where consequences could be minimized. The chance to get caught could be minimized. Now, at that point, what's holding you back? It should always be, first and foremost, I'm a professional. I have morals. I have integrity. This way, it can't shift, or it's harder to shift. But Connie, that foundation, that's what the inmates are going to attack. Because remember, I like what you said. You said character flaw. So the foundation is it is the character. So if I could see a bit of weakness, which let's say is an external reasoning for why I don't do, what I do, or what I don't do what I'm not supposed to do, if that reasoning is external, it's not going to be strong enough to hold on when that foundation gets tested. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct. I mean, like when someone internally, like when your convictions are so strong, like this is wrong, right? This goes against me, it goes against my values, my character, my beliefs. I think that's stronger than any external consequence for anything, because you're holding yourself accountable to a certain standard, as opposed to, oh, I might get in trouble, or someone outside might impose some sort of consequence on me.
Yes, and when me and Connie were actually having this discussion, a couple of things that we were looking at is two things that could allow this to happen. And maybe there's more, but just to have sake of discussion, we looked at the physical, which is the environment. So the environment can include anything, right? Your peers, the layout of the facility, your supervisors, the culture of your facility, Then you also have the emotional, which to me, it could be receptive from the environment. But again, if you have strong moral values, it doesn't matter what the environment is. You're going to keep it in check. So the reason why I kept them separate is because strong emotional values, strong emotional feelings will not happen if you have high values. So it doesn't matter what the environment allows. I myself am not going to allow it in. But there is a relationship. I'm not going to say there is a relationship. But with that said, Connie, let's talk about the environment. So obviously the environment can allow it, or the environment can put a stop to it. So at what points do you think that the environment allows it to happen?
So I think the environment allows it to happen when, some people, for example, like say an officer is on a post for many years, right? That officer is very familiar with that post, with all the blind spots in that post, with the inmates that are assigned to that post. And I think what comes with that being there for many years is there is some complacency in that maybe the supervisor doesn't tour that unit regularly anymore, because I know Officer Joe is awesome. He's handling his business. No need for me to have a presence, right? I think on the civilian side of the house, when I think of like some staff that may be working on a third shift, and we know third shift has skeleton crew, right? Like anything could be happening on a third shift where maybe there isn't as many eyes and ears out, which the environment kind of allows for that because there's minimized movement on the shift. I mean, there may be some emergency movement. I don't know how that works in all facilities, but but I think because it isn't as busy, say on a third shift, from the perspective of a lot of foot traffic. Like, I'm not saying that operations isn't as important on third shift, so I don't want anyone to get me wrong. All I'm saying is that third shift doesn't have as much presence. And so the environment in that sense could allow for anything to happen. So I think that's some of where we are as far as how the environment allows.
Yeah, and I just want to say something, guys, because Connie touched on a lot of stuff. So when the environment's an obstacle, so again, you got the supervisor touring, you got a partner, you got cameras all over the place, right? And your foundation has not been shifted, but let's say it's weak. Let's say I go in with that external foundation of, well, I'm not going to do it because it's just not worth the consequences. It's not worth getting in trouble for. Now, mind you, consequences could be different. Consequences aren't always the discipline. Consequences could be you being compromised. So again, if I lead in with that, Connie, if I lead in with the fact that I'm, the external foundation, the fact that, the rules, the regulations, the consequences, right? And an inmate's able to shift that perspective and minimize it. So now when I first come in, I'm worried about the consequences. I start saying, well, I would never want to have sex with an inmate here because, one, there's cameras here. There's supervisors coming through every minute. I got an officer partner right here. But all of a sudden, when the consequences shift and there's trust built, so let's say one of the consequences is compromised, right? But let's say this inmate's building a trust with me and I'm foolish enough to allow this person in. I'm not seeing this inmate as a manipulator. I'm seeing this inmate as not even an inmate. She's not like the other inmates. I mean, I may even consider myself still a team player with the other officers because she or he is not like the other inmates, right? So now, once there's a trust and that inmate's able to build the trust and start, minimizing the consequences and the actions that could occur by you doing this physical act. Now, look at how my perspective switches. Where's the blind spots? My supervisor just toured. They're probably not expected to come in for another hour. Oh, I'm working a minimal unit today. I don't have a partner. Or I'm working in a satellite unit where my supervisor, if they come, they're going to come once, and we know they're not going to come back again. So if you stay focused on the external, on the consequences, and eventually you go with that right mindset, noting the concerns that could get you caught, and then finally that person minimizes it, and then you start shifting your foundation and start looking at ways that you wouldn't get caught. Now, correct your mindset right then and there. Why am I looking for potential ways to commit to this act? Correct,
because
Connie?
now the external doesn't have the same weight. The external has shifted, and now I, as an individual, am compromised. And when I, as the individual, is compromised as the person, that means I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do whatever I can. Whereas I feel that, certainly when you do have, So I think honestly, the compromise already happened. The moment that you start looking for where the cameras are not working or where the cameras are off or where the blind spot is, you have already compromised as a person. Any morals, values, whatever that you had are already to the wayside, because the moment the opportunity presents itself where those things are no longer on the list of concerns and you think there will be no consequences, you are going to go forward with the act. I think the bigger concern that comes from that thought process is that the act in of itself is there's a significant consequence for, right? Because inmates cannot consent, right? And so, whether you're caught on tape, not caught on tape, the inmate has secured a specimen, like whatever happens, right? Because that's the bigger compromise. I had the experience of an inmate securing DNA, right? And so once you are compromised to that extent, like what are the consequences to that aside from losing your job, right? Like, are you looking to become an inmate? That's like, I don't know how your mind gets you to the point of this act is so important that I'm willing to do jail time.
Right. So and I agree with that, Connie. So what I put that on is exactly what we said, is that it doesn't get put in your head because it gets taken away. Because listen, it's a very weak foundation to govern your professionalism. It really is. So if I was an inmate and I sense that, I'm gonna attack that. I am. I'm gonna attack that to where that doesn't the consequences doesn't get seen. Now, we gave a great hint to people right now, because usually the process is hard to see, and we kind of told you a shift in mindset just now, where you're looking for ways to do it as opposed to what's stopping you. You know what I mean? Just the shift. So just take note of that mindset, because guys, I'm telling you, that's true. Because sometimes you could be sitting with a partner and you could be shooting the breeze, and you can get a partner that could be telling you, hey, Gans, I'll tell you something, man. If you wanted to have sex with an inmate, you could do it here, here, here. I said, why are we even having that discussion? And why do you know all that? Like that. But you know what? I'm just saying, man, you came up with things that I've never thought of because I've never looked for it. When you go to work, I don't think you should be looking for it. Ways that I could have sex with an inmate. And then you come up and you give me 20 ways. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, man, you must have been thinking about this, because you came up with 20 ways and it's written in the notebook each way. Oh, and better cross out the names of those inmates that you chose in those scenarios. No, I'm a little too far, but the thing is, you get what I'm saying, Connie?
No, I absolutely get it. But I'm trying not to laugh, but I think the other side of that too is like, that person is actually compromised in so many other ways though, right? So like, even if it's not just sex, for the person who's thinking that way from a professional standpoint, you have to think like, okay, so I know, so when do I do my rounds? Do I even need to do these rounds? When do I do this thing? Do I even need to document? Should I not document? Oh, I don't need to document. No one reviews the logbook anyway. Like, there's all these other things where that person may feel that there are vulnerabilities in the system. And I feel like those are the type of people who are looking to get over in other areas as well. It's not just the sexual situation that we're focused on.
Right. I agree. It'd be funny after the person, says, he's like, let me just tell you what I mean. I've drawn out a map. I'm going to show you this map. And this is pretty much a drawn out plan. I was like, hold on, brother. Wait a second. So you have 20 and a map, and a map. What's another thing, guys? We now, again, we're having some fun with the dialogue, but guys, this is a very serious topic, but we can have fun. We're corrections. We have a dark humor. But I want to also mention something else real quick with the consequences before we go to another part. Believe it or not, the consequences, obviously, of the compromised staff is also, being told that they're going to turn and bring something in. And obviously, that's why it's a no-no for us. Like, us as a team know that the moment an officer has sex with an inmate, there's a chance for contraband. That contraband to find its way into me, into you. And we're talking about death. We're talking about something that violates the safety, the trust, ultimately, right? So when this trap starts to hinder or starts to happen, when the inmate starts to play the game, that's one of the things that they're going to push is that you can trust me. So I think in a compromised staff member's mind, they're not thinking that this inmate is going to ask them for anything that can turn them against their peers, because in their mind, I think that they specialize this inmate. She's not like, or he's not like the other inmates. Therefore, in my mind, when, you know, I'm thinking about being compromised and bringing something in, not from her, because I would like to think if I was going to mess around with an inmate, and guys, we're going to be highly empathetic here. So we're going to kind of take this perspective to make sure we give you guys good dialogue here. I would like to think that if I was going to have sex with an inmate, hypothetical, I'm going to say it one more time, hypothetical, there has to be a trust between me and that individual, because in the back of my mind, I would like to know, or I like to think I know, that this could be a game being played. But if this inmate is able to foster this trust, then I'm not going to see this inmate as another inmate. Therefore, to me, she's not playing me. This is real. This is real, and there's no way she's going to ask me to do something that could sacrifice my job, my well-being, ultimately my life. So Connie, that trust to me eliminates the I'm not on the same team. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you're compromised, my fear is you're going to bring something in that's going to hurt us. You violate our trust. Now, if that inmate's able to give me some level of trust, and I minimize that, where she's not going to put me in that situation to turn against my peers, then maybe I don't see myself as outside of my team, because I don't see that inmate as an inmate. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. I mean, it's kind of like when we talked about, you know, calling inmates by their first name, or inmates calling us by our first name, right? Like, it's a way that the trust pushes us to let our guard down, right? And so if you're actually trusting an inmate, there's a way that your guard is down and that inmate has now disarmed you, right? And so, you know, our titles, our roles, the authority inherent in our roles are the things that remind us who we are in the context of the facility. So I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I think, you know, as we consider the way the process happens and the way the manipulation happens, I think that's a good thing for us to kind of keep at the forefront of our minds, that with the inmate population, it's not a situation where we can trust them, right? And the moment that we start thinking, I trust this person, we're certainly already behind the 8 ball.
Right. And again, guys, I don't know if there's really a specific order that we're discussing here. We're just trying to give you ways to identify the process. And I think right now that's what we're doing. I want to talk about attention too. Just attention that seems to be overwhelming, and you notice it and you don't do nothing about it. Now, again, let's go back into the mind of a dirty staff member, you know, and I get a younger female who's not an ugly inmate giving me this attention that I never had before. I could, you know, again, you know, maybe I'm not dirty at first. Again, let's get to that point, right? She's giving me attention that I never had. She's filling up my ego, doing what I can to kind of build my sense of self, even if it's just by the attention. She doesn't even have to really say anything, because sometimes looks carry more weight. You know, the way you're staring at me says something, you know? So, you know, sometimes you work with people that, man, they'll take a break in your unit and hang out with the inmates. You know, they'll go to areas that are not related to their duties, and it kind of starts to make obvious that, man, this person ain't coming to see me as another staff member. They're coming to see this inmate who's seems to be here all the time. And again, now you guys are caught up with that attention. Now, I'll give you a quick little story I remember, where there was an officer that worked with an individual, older man, who worked third shift, never really took any breaks. But one day he did. And now, mind you, he never took any breaks. So the unit's gotten used to him being there all 8 hours. You know, they didn't have to be clean for a half an hour when the other officers there. No, they were, you know, routine all 8 hours. So whatever the emergent situation was, he goes out to whatever, out on break, leaves the unit. That's the key. Then the officer that's doing the break sees that there's a female coming out. It's a dorm in a robe with nothing underneath, clearly visible, to get water. And the officer does the right thing and sends the inmate back and says, hey, listen, can't be out there like that. If you want to get water, come back out a little bit more respectable and, put something on, more than what you have on. The inmate goes, well, such and such officer allows me to do that. Well, right off the bat, I'm definitely going to go talk to such and such officer, but I am going to tell this inmate, well, I'm not such and such officer. I just gave you an order. There's that social validation that we talked about. It's in my book. So now when the officer comes back in, you talk to the officer at me and say, hey, listen, that inmate, man, the Spanish girl on this side, she came out with this very limited clothing. I clearly sent her back. But the concern I have is that she dropped your name saying that you allow that, and I'm thinking that you would do exactly what I would do if you saw her come out like that. You would correct it. And he goes, she's just a young kid. She stares at me all the time. And, I don't know. I think she has a thing for me. Okay. Okay. Well, what have you done to correct that? Well, no. What have you done to correct it? Because here's the real test. If you truly did not want that attention, you would stop it. There's no alternative here, guys. If you didn't want the attention from that inmate, you would clearly say, stop, give her the directives of why it's inappropriate, whatever it is, but you would put a stop to that attention immediately. And even go so far as if you have to charge the inmate, document it, do whatever it is. But if you didn't want the attention, that's the only action you take. Now, when someone brings it up and he says, well, it doesn't bother me, I have control. Well, but why not stop it? You haven't answered that yet. That's the something you haven't answered yet. So again, I'm going to ask you again, why not just stop it? You know what I mean? I mean, Connie, in my mind, the reason why they don't stop it is because they do want that attention, right? I mean, what's your thoughts?
I mean, so I have two perspectives on it. So one perspective is they enjoy it. It's a break from the monotony of the day, something to give a little spike of excitement, wake me up, whatever that is, right? I think the other one could be that in the instance, especially if you work in a unit all the time, it's like, oh, they do that all the time, right? It's if I neutralize this thing that they do, then it doesn't have the impact on me. And perhaps the thought process is, they no longer have the power to use their physical against me because I'm not affected by it, right? So if I made a big deal about it every time, then it's kind of giving that physical, the power per se over me or over their, it's giving the physical power in general. So, but if I don't acknowledge it, maybe I am actually neutralizing and so now it's not a thing, right? They may come out and do it, but I don't look at them or, they don't do it as often because they're not getting the response from me that they would like to get. But I do feel that ultimately we know that that's just inappropriate in general. And I feel that as an officer, I mean, even in medical, we've had, inmates come asking, male inmates do some very interesting things in a medical exam. I'll just keep it as nice as I can, right? And so we've had to terminate examinations because what they're doing is inappropriate. If you don't say something, it's almost signaling that it's okay, that I'm okay with it, and that, I am not I'm not going to stop you from doing whatever it is you're doing. It's almost like welcoming, if I would dare to say that. So, same officer in the unit, woman comes out, nothing under the robe. Oh, she does that all the time. Yeah, but you've never done anything to correct it. So you've kind of signaled to her that it's okay or that you like it.
Sorry about that. I lost the video for a second. Oh, got it back. I meant to hit the video button. But you're right. And that's why it's so important that you make it known. Like you said something key. Says that all the time. Yeah, because you allow it. Like that to me, as a person in a position of authority, for you to say that, how do you not internalize the fact that, well, if she does it all the time, it's because you have allowed that to happen. Now, the sad thing is that most people won't revisit that. The reason why is because it's a lot. Because you're going to have to go back and really, check yourself. But I will tell you one thing, though, that will happen by you having the dialogue with this officer or staff member is they'll be a little bit more on point with you. Now, that brings me to our next part of the discussion. All because I work with you for years doesn't mean I know the shit you do in the closet. Because if I'm highly professional, you're not going to do it, especially if, I'm one that, may police my own. If I want to say, hey, listen, I actually think that's kind of inappropriate, and you set the standard, even as a peer, even if you just mention it, to the other officer, discreetly, hey, I don't like that inmate out all the time. It's awkward. It starts to put the officer on their toes. Now, whether they internalize it as you doing them a favor or whether they just said, screw this officer, but you know what? And that's the funny thing, guys. Let me tell you something right now. There's another sign that we crossed into that you're too involved. Because now your actions as perceived by someone else, now when that person's not around, you'll probably go back and hang out with that inmate again. You know what I mean? So I could actually picture this in my mind. I tell this officer, hey, it's a little uncomfortable you two, hanging out. That officer now going back to that inmate because I'm sure there's a whole history of here where beliefs have now changed. Because mind you, when we talk about the shift in the foundation, the shift in perspective, there's a belief shift. Trust and believe. Let's not. Belief leads to behaviors, but behaviors can change beliefs. Eventually, you start to justify it. So in this case here, I could actually see that person going back to the inmate, right? To say, hey, listen, when Gangi works, can't be doing this. Now, you automatically know you're doing something wrong, but you'll justify it because Gangi thinks we're too close. Well, why the hell would you tell her that then? If we are, if me and you are brothers, then why would you tell the inmate what we just talked about? That right there should be a sign that you are too close. The moment you told the inmate, yo, you can't hang out at the podium because Gangi doesn't like it, well, your relationship with that inmate is too close. And the other factor will be when Gangi doesn't work and the other officer comes in, hey, come out. Hey, what's going on? And then continue in the chat. So something is wrong at that point. But Connie, I know you're laughing. You see this happening? Because you're laughing. Does it make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the fact that you're kind of putting the inmate on notice, right? So it's like, okay, I'm on notice because my partner has now said something to me. But now I'm going to put the inmate on notice so that my partner never has to say something to me about it again. And I feel like that's just too much, right? Like the fact that you're actually going to, it's almost like you're confiding in the inmate, which I think is like, well, why would you do that, right? Like, why would you feel like you owe the inmate an explanation? And I think that in of itself is one of those signals to your brain to say, oh, I'm this ain't right. What I'm doing is not right. If I have to be kind of put on notice by my partner, and then on top of that, I have to make sure that the inmate doesn't do it. Why? Because I don't have it in me to send the inmate back. Like, because I encourage these conversations. So now I'm going to put it on the inmate. Like, listen, don't come out. Right? Because like, if you just don't come out, then I don't even have to have the conversation. Right? Am I not strong enough to not have that conversation? Is the bond between me and that inmate too close that I don't want to send them back when they come out to talk to me? So I think there's a lot in the midst of that if you've got to actually tell the inmate, don't come out.
Well, it goes back to the attention, though. Because think about when the inmate's at the podium, they're giving that person the attention. Or whatever, the inmate, and maybe sometimes the person wants the attention subconsciously. So they're not quick to tell the inmate, no. But when they're put on point by another officer, they do an external justification because it leaves room for the inmate to come out again later on. So it doesn't end the relationship, So officer says, I go back to the inmate, I don't end it abruptly. I don't say, hey, you got to go back. You shouldn't be out here. It's more like you got to go back now because Officer Gangi's here. So the relationship's still not over. Guys, you haven't ended it. The relationship still exists because Gangi's not working tomorrow. So this inmate's going to come out. So you haven't made an effort to end it, One of the obvious things, and again, guys, these are process things that could lead to what we mentioned, the outcome. So just know that I don't know if this is exact order because this could happen, throughout your interactions with the inmate. But there's also sometimes too when an inmate gets in trouble for something and they're wrong and you defend them with a whisper. Now, let me explain what that means. All right. Connie, do you know what that means or can I explain it?
You can explain it.
Okay. Do you think you know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean.
Okay. So I'm going to use you in this scenario.
Great.
You're my partner, not the inmate. Don't worry. We have rules, Connie. We have rules. Even in hypotheticals, I have to be very, very careful. So let's just say there is an inmate I'm really close to, right? Too close. And now let's say you see this inmate doing something foolish and you go to write the inmate up, right? And I go to you and say, hey, Connie, can I talk to you for a second? That inmate, it's a good worker. She's misunderstood. I'm not saying it loud. This is my defense in a whisper. Now, mind you, a good officer responds, the fuck are you talking about? The inmate did this, this, and this. I'm writing the inmate up. But now think about me with the whisper. I'm compromised. The inmate obviously did something wrong. And now here's the funny thing, though. There's also an obligation here, too, by the way, because I'm coming up asking you for a favor, which means maybe I owe that favor to the inmate. So what you need to do is don't let me pay that favor back. End the obligation. Does something make sense here or no?
Yeah, I mean, that's just insane, right? Like, why would you intervene on behalf of the inmate, right? And think it's okay, right? Like, because you're right. A good officer is going to say, what do you mean? No, this is all the shit they did, right? But the fact that you're there, because then, I mean, the one thing you made me think of was, so was there something that the officer has already done that he's now trying to make sure like there's no heat brought to the inmate or to the unit, right? Like, because it may not necessarily just be that inmate, right? It could just be, I've got an arrangement going on that maybe other inmates know about. So I need to make sure like the inmates that know about it don't get in trouble. Like, it's just crazy.
Right. Now, I'm sure there's many other scenarios, but I still want to finish up with finishing the act. So eventually we have to get to the sexual component. Now, even though there's going to be some that it's for power, again, I can see this more with the male staff, because the women could maybe play a more of a submissive role, and they think through power, coercion, threat, the position of authority that this inmate's not going to do nothing. And again, that's a heavy level of power that you think you have because you're only there a certain amount of times a day. You're not going to be there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's one thing. And again, we do have people that their egos are so full that they actually will commit, and there is that power. It's not about trust here. It's I have power, and it's like narcissistic actually. Technically, it's like I have so much power that this inmate would be a fool, that my power is present even when I'm not there. And that's funny because you can see how weak those people are when they come to work the next day and they start seeing that the internal affairs unit's been in their unit in the logbook. Oh, you're really powerful, but now you just see that they're touring your unit. You're not as powerful as you think you are. Now, the other one is more where we're talking about, where if the act is committed, there's also outside the power, the other thing is a trust. Now, it's a one-way, it technically is a one-way trust. I'm not going to say the inmate's setting someone up, but it's the staff trusting the inmate that this act will remain between these two. And the reason why I'm saying trust is because the moment that act takes place, you have put in everything at risk. Job, family, your livelihood. I mean, there's so much that you are putting at risk at this point that has to be that officer, that staff member has to have 100% trust in that inmate to commit to that act. So there's two, Connie. There's the trust or absolute power. So in the end, it's still wrong because you don't have absolute power over that inmate. Trust and believe that. Not to that level, because now you've given them leverage. You may have absolute power when you don't have the leverage, when they don't have the leverage. I agree with that. Your perception of authority will maintain. They don't have leverage. You have absolute power, 100%. But every time they start collecting that leverage, and then you finish it off with that sex act, you are not in power. You do not have absolute power. They do. And for the trust factor, it's more of a relationship built over time in which that person says, you're not like the other inmates, because that will be played out. Just like that inmate will probably say, well, you're not like the rest of the staff. And, but the end is, if you start seeing that inmate as not as an inmate or not like the other inmates, then you truly haven't separated yourself from your peers who see your act in disgust. So that could be how you minimize the consequences of how your peers will also see you. You know what I mean? So if I consider this act, I mean, you know what's a good standing is that I'm here for my brother and sister. And I know that if I commit to that act, it can compromise me to a point where I can't protect my brother and sister. Mm-hmm. But if this inmate can come up to me and play this game to the point where I start justifying it by saying, well, she's not like the other inmates, or he's not like the other inmates, then it kind of eases what should be that divide. Because I haven't betrayed my people, not with her, because she's not like the other inmates. Therefore, it's okay. She's not going to compromise me. She's not going to get me to, bring in contraband that can hurt my brothers and sisters. So I'm still good. I'm still a team player.
Yeah, but I think the challenge is, how do you know she's not like the others, right? And so the fact that you know this inmate so well, to know like with confidence that she's not like the others, in of itself is already a compromise.
Connie, that's so spot. I think we've been doing this today with our dialogue, because that's like the person like, I would never have sex with an inmate, but here's 30 ways you could. Wait a second, man. But again, all fun. I think we covered a big gist of it. Connie, you have anything you'd like to say in closing? Because I see you're getting a little tired.
No, it's something's in my eye. Sorry. So,
it's beauty, Connie. Beauty. Huh? Beauty is in your eye, because I can see my reflection. Go ahead. Sorry.
I bet. Of course.
I like to think I'm good looking.
Oh, of course you are.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So I guess I would just, it's the usual caution, right? Like, that we can't trust the population, that they usually are out for some sort of secondary gain, that they cannot consent. I think there's a laundry list of reasons why getting involved emotionally and physically with any inmate is wrong, right? And so when you think of the far end of the spectrum where you're compromised to the point where you're bringing in contraband, I think, there's got to be a breaking point where you acknowledge that you are not only compromised as an individual, but you're also putting the lives of your brothers and sisters at risk. And so I would just say, really, there's a point where you have to be able to tap out, right? Yeah. And I feel like, we might say to ourselves, I can't come forward, right? Because there are consequences, but there are things you could do, right? Like, so if you feel like you're in that space, like, is it wrong to say I need a transfer? Like, could I be rotated out of this unit? I don't know what happens. Like, if someone decides they want to come forward because they feel like they're compromised. Like, do you know what someone can do?
Well, well, first off, I wouldn't say compromise at that point. I would say if they feel that working with female or the opposite sex isn't for them, it takes a lot of courage to admit it. And hopefully that courage is respected by higher ups. And, if they could adjust, they could adjust. I mean, some people will say, well, it's part of the job function. It is. Professionalism should be professionalism, no matter if you're dealing with a male or a female. But if the person does know that that's a weakness for them, I don't think we need to test them.
Right. So that's really where I'm coming from. That, like, I mean, I think it's great that we talk about these things and it's almost like this awakening, right? We let people know. So here are all the ways that this could be happening. But I feel like, all right, so now I've watched this video and like, oh, wow, maybe I am compromised. Like, how do I get out of it? Not to, and be supported, as opposed to looking like a bad guy, because I could see not feeling incentivized to come forward and get myself out of this situation before it goes too far.
Right. So I just want to explain what I think I know what your definition of compromise is. So it's not so much about bringing something in. It's more about I'm too emotionally involved, which also obviously itself is compromise. So yeah, at that point, it takes a lot of courage to step up and admit. But I think what should motivate people is the fact that you're in a position now where your actions could affect others. So you don't have an option anymore. This is not just about you anymore. So you have to step up. There's no alternative here. So if I felt that, my actions, maybe I am too involved, maybe I should, and then let the consequences fall where they may. Because at the end, if my actions now, because I'm emotionally involved, lead to someone getting hurt, now I'm a coward now. Because my actions were, what's funny? Here's another thing, guys. A lot of us focus on the person committing the deed and the consequences of that. But there's also the consequences that affect the other people that work with that individual. So if you're getting caught up in the process, and I think we gave you a lot of little hints as to how you can recognize certain things, especially with that sway of the perspective, then you have to step up. Because these aren't just your actions. You're being selfish. And I'll be honest with you guys, and you guys know yourself best. If you feel that an inmate's giving you a lot of attention, nip it. But if you feel it, why haven't you nipped it? That's a question you need to ask yourself. And I'm sure there's people here that's getting that attention and kind of just shrug it off, as opposed to, well, to me, that's like you still want it. Tell them, be adamant and put it down, place that marker down that shows that this is done. End it. Because at any moment that you don't feel like ending it, to me, that means even ignored it means you still want it to exist. Because like the officer said, happens all the time. That's because you want it to happen. Now, guys, real quick, don't forget we got the books on the market, The Cave of the Cocoon, Inmate Manipulation Decoded. We do touch on areas of this, not as specific, but we do touch on it where it's inside the inmate manipulation book, which definitely covers what you need to know in regards to the ultimate, what could be the ultimate setup. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talk, you brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. And as always, stay safe.